Hello, everyone. Have a good evening. So, as our friend said, it's my first lecture in English. So I did the same presentation in Portuguese. Let's see, 3 weeks ago. So I'm doing my best. Okay. So today we are going to talk about ethics and ecology. So it's a subject that's very important for me. And I'd like to share some information with you guys about that and make some connections between this subject with Spiritism, okay? So, let's go. Ethics and ecology. Let's start first define the word ecology. So, it's the branch of biology that deals with the relationship of the organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. So, first is about the living beings and as well about the environment, not just the living beings. This term was created by Ernest Haeckel in 866, and it is a junction of two different words in Greek, which is house and study, means house and study. So it's about the study of the things, of the habitats of living things. So it's the study of the house, everything related to the house. There is another word that use a similar construction in another area of knowledge, economy. So eco in economy has the same meaning of eco in ecology. Economy is the thing of your home. So you study everything related to the way that you take care of your home, and ecology has this similarity as well with economy. And nowadays, we also talk about triple bottom line: sustainability, economic, and social. I use this picture to illustrate the word because normally we make a very strong relationship between ecology and the nature, the forests, and lakes, and rivers, and so on. But ecology is also about the urban environment. Just to recall everyone here about that as well. So in this date, we have another important event, at least for us as spirits. So it's the release of the first edition of the Spirits book. Okay, so at the end of the 19th century, it was a very rich period of our history in terms of development of new areas of knowledge, including the Spiritism and as well psychology, and I believe that almost all human science starts in this period of the time. So it was very rich in terms of new areas of knowledge. So let's talk a little bit about the cycles. Using, in this case, a documentary produced by National Geographic Channel called One Strange Rock. Who knows this documentary? It's very, very nice, no? So they have a very interesting approach. They choose some astronauts that they try to explain the dynamic of the planet Earth in the perspective of their astronauts, okay? For someone that is observing the Earth from the space. So there is some stories in each one of these episodes. I have selected the first one in one story that starts on the desert. Let's take my notes here. Desert. So in the desert we have some store, that a lot of winds, a lot of sand, and all this sand spread out all over. And it's amazing because all these sediments in the sand travel from the desert in Africa until the South America, and these sediments is reach the Amazon basin, and they help the forest to be enriched with this kind of sediment. So this system transport almost 27 megatons of sediment per year from the Africa until the South America. So the scientists say that part of the rainforest diversity can be explained based on this fact, that this system that transport this sediment from one place to another. So based on this, the rainforest has growth, and many people believe that the rainforest is the lung of the earth, because the rainforest is able to produce oxygen through the photosynthesis. Do you believe that's true, that the rainforest is the lung of the world or not? Yes? Actually, it's not, because the balance is zero. Every oxygen produced by the rainforest is consumed by itself. So all the living beings, even the trees, during the night, the trees consume oxygen as well. So, the rainforest is important, but not because that. Let's continue. The rainforest accumulate a lot of water. There is a lot of rain, but the water is accumulating inside the trees and the soil and so on. And this water accumulated in the forest evaporate and creates a phenomenon called flying rivers. Do you know, guys, this terminology, flying rivers? These are rivers in the sky. So the astronauts use this picture here to explain that it's very hard to take a very good picture from the rainforest, because it's always cloudy, a lot of clouds, so it's hard to take a good picture of the rainforest. And these flying rivers, if you consider that Rio River is going to be the largest river in the world, even bigger than Nilo or Amazon. But when the flying river goes to the west, they reach this mountain chain, which is Andes, and they convert the flying rivers in rain and create the water flows. And the water flows goes down through the mountains, mix it with other rocks and other materials, and bring with these water flows a lot of sediments as well, just like from the desert to the forest. This sediment goes through the river until reach the ocean. In the delta of the river, you can see here these sediments in the delta of the river. And these sediments nourish different living beings. One of them is called diatoms. Diatoms are unicells living beings, a kind of algae with a hard wall cell made of silica. And these very little unicells living beings are able to do photosynthesis as well. And the oxygen that we are breathing now, 50% of them came from these very small living beings. So did you see all this complex system? The sand in the desert, the wind brings these sediments to the rainforest, the evaporation, the flying rivers bring the sediments from the mountains to the rivers again, reach the ocean to nourish these very small living beings. So my point here, I told this story just to make the point that the system in our planet Earth are interconnected. There is a dynamic between them. This dynamic is very important in order to keep the environment healthy. Another story, but now not from the National Geographic channel, but National Geographic magazine. We have an internal joke in my home that my home is an extension of IKEA and National Geographic. So this is a very interesting article in this issue of National Geographic, I guess June last year, I guess. I forgot to put here. Is about the communication among trees. This scientist, Suzanne Simard, there's a very interesting TED from her as well, figured out that there is some communication between the trees. The big trees are able to send signals to the young trees, and not just beyond just signals, they send nutrients as well. Because when you have a dense forest, it's hard to receive light, because the tall trees receive more light than the small ones. So there is a way to transfer the nutrients from the tall trees to the small ones. Another kind of communication is a kind of alarm. If some trees has a disease, there is a signal telling the others that that tree is not good, so they can take care of that. So the way that they discovered that was very interesting. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please watch the TED Talk. Okay, so it's one more example of this kind of integration, the dynamic of that is available in the nature. Sometimes we are seeing the forest, it looks like, okay, just a bunch of trees. No, it's not just a bunch of trees. It's a very complex system. And now, okay, we learned so far that the nature is complex, there is a lot of dynamics in order to keep the environment healthy. Now let's talk a little bit about the ethics. So starting with the definition of the ethic. Based on this dictionary, hold on please. Merriam-Webster, the discipline dealing with what's good and bad, and with moral duty and obligation. So what's good, what's bad is a kind of, how can I say that when you answer a test, you have all the answers of your test, gabarito. I totally forgot this word in English.
Template.
Template, yes, template. It's a kind of template, with all the answers about what's good, what's bad. Is this kind of subject that is studied by the ethic. Okay. From the other source is very similar from Britannica Encyclopedia. Ethics is also called moral philosophy, the discipline concerned with what's morally good and bad. So I'm using this another definition as well, just to illustrate that the ethic is also an area of the philosophy, okay? So the ethics is a part of the philosophy, just like aesthetic or epidemiology and so on. Examples of ethical questions, just to illustrate. How should we live? Shall we aim at happiness or at knowledge, virtue or the creation of beautiful objects? What's my motivation? What's my purpose? If we choose happiness, will it be our own or the happiness of all? Myself versus the others. And what of the more particular question that face us? Is it right to be dishonest in a good cause? The means justify the ends. Can we justify living in opulence while everywhere elsewhere in the world people are starving? The inequality. is going to war justified in case where it's likely that innocent people will be killed? Again, the ends justify the means justify the ends. Is it wrong to clone a human being or to destroy human embryos in medical research? No? So I use the comparison that ethics is a template, okay? This template is not static. They change over the time because let's say 200 years ago, it was not possible even imagine that we as human beings can handle this kind of technology to manipulate embryos. So the ethic is not static. The template is not the same forever. No, they change over the time because the context is different. What are our obligations, if any, to the generations of human beings who will come after us and to the non-human animals with who we share the planet? So is the dilemma between the present time and the future. No? I would like to use as much as possible the resource right now, not save for the future. And as well between us and them, myself or the others. This kind of dilemma. So all these questions are related to the ethics. So ethical questions. And going even for in philosophy, there is an area, a philosophy viewpoint called anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism. There's a philosophical viewpoint arguing that human beings are the central or most significant entities in the world. So, following this kind of viewpoint, based on this viewpoint, the human being is the center of the universe or center of the cosmos. This is a basic belief embedded in many Western religion and philosophies. So it's very common here in your hemisphere. This part is interesting, that human life has an intrinsic value, while other entities, including animals, plants, minerals, resources, and so on, are resources that may be justifiable to be exploited for the benefit of humankind. So there is a concept in ethics that is intrinsic value. The human life has intrinsic value, with all these other resources has an instrumental value. So they exist only to serve us. So this is the viewpoint of the anthropocentrism. The problem is that this kind of viewpoint is very, very strong nowadays. Is selfish. Looks like many people believe that we are the rest of the world or the rest of the nature exists only to serve us. If you take a look on the Western religion, many religions believe that we as a human being were created as special creatures by God. So there is a gray area here, because a lot of religions, and sometimes even some people inside the Spiritism, has this kind of view. But I'd like to propose a new way to see this kind of concept, but we are going to go in more details in a few slides. Okay. Do you know, guys, this curve, this graph here? It becomes very famous in, I guess, in 2000 something, when that documentary from former Vice President Al Gore. The Inconvenient, I guess is, what's the name English? I remember the title in Portuguese, but I guess English is Inconvenient Truth. The Inconvenient Truth, yeah. So this graph shows the red line is the average global temperature, and the blue line is the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. So this curve is also known as hockey stick graph, because the inflection point. There is an inflection point here, just like the hockey stick. What's the meaning of this inflection point? So this inflection point is around 820, 840. So it's the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Is when we as human beings start to get the carbon that was stuck in underground and transfer from underground to the air, as coal, oil, and so on. So it was an important moment in our history, because I believe that by the very first time, we as human beings figured out that we are creating a huge impact in the planet. What kind of impact? For instance, this is another institution, very serious institution. I checked with some of my colleagues. One of them is a professor in Brazil, university. So this source is very truthful. More than 20,000 species are threatened with extinction nowadays. 40% of amphibians, 25% of mammals, 34% of the conifers, and so on. So we are destroying biodiversity. Our way of life is destroying the environment. So let's talk a little bit about the Spiritism now, make some connections between these stories, the dynamic of the nature, ethics, and so on. Start with the Spirit's book, The Divine or Natural Law. The Spirit's book is divided in 3 books, 3 or 4. I'm sorry, I don't remember by heart. I guess 4. The book 3 is about the natural law, the moral laws. So what's the natural law? Natural law is God's law. It alone ensures the happiness of human beings. It shows that what they should or should not do. It's possible to see here some connection between the moral law and ethics. What should or should not do. And that they only suffer when they deviate from it. So it is a guidance, okay? If you are following the divine or natural law, you are more close to be happy than if you go in other direction. Is God's law eternal? Like God, it's eternal and unalterable. Unalterable. Sometimes I have some difficulties in pronunciation, I'm sorry. So in this point, it's a little bit different than ethics, because we mentioned that ethics is evolving, because we are evolving as well. So the ethics evolve with us, but the natural law or divine law remains the same. That's the beauty of this kind of law, the wisdom behind that. So that is the definition of divine law, and we have some different laws in the Spirit's book. One of them is the law of preservation. Okay, and this question is very interesting because remember, the Spirit's book was published before the Ecology. The Ecology was developed after the publishment of the Spirit's book. Has God, while given to man the desire to live, always furnished with the means of doing so? So God is always providing the means to keep us alive? Yes. And if man does not always find them, it is because he does not know how to avail himself of the resources around him. So we are messed up. We have all resources necessary, but we don't know how to use them. God could not implant in man the love of life without giving him the means of living. So we love our life, so God also provides the means. And of production sufficient to furnish all its inhabitants with the necessaries of life. So we have everything that's necessary to keep everyone happy. It's only that which is necessary that's useful. That which is superfluous is never useful. So this part is important as well. So the difference between necessary and superfluous. What's the superfluous in your life? Maybe if there is no enough resource for everyone, maybe it's because we are putting more value in superfluous things than necessities. Other questions that came from the same chapter, Law of Preservation. Has not nature traced out the limit of our needs in the requirements of our organization? Again, the dynamic between different systems. So these limits is defined by this system. These limits are defined by the system. So if you have a good balance between these different moving parts, the nature works fine. If you break this balance, something bad happens. So it's very clear that exists a limit, because the balance must be kept. Nature has indicated the limits of his needs by his organization, but his vices has deteriorated his construction and create for him wants that are not real needs. No? We create needs that are not real needs. And one more. What is to be thought of those who monopolize the production of the earth in order to produce for themselves superfluities, at the expense of the others who lack the necessaries of life? So that question about the inequality, few people use more resources from the nature than others. So we have people in starvation, other people waste food and waste other nature resources. They forget the law of God and will have to answer for the privations they have caused others to endure. So when we are using more resources from the nature than the necessary, we are accumulate some debts, moral debts. That's the thought here. It's why it's a moral law. So there is limit. So we must be aware about this limit, because if you are going beyond this limit, we are getting some debts, moral debts. So what's your place in role in this? Consider all this information. This is a famous statement from Gospel: love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew. So who is your neighbor? Your neighbor is of your family. Is it there? Close, no? Your village, no? Your country, Brazil, United States, Canada, or the ant. So over the time, I believe that our frontier in terms of who is our neighbor was amplified, because in the past it was just our family, and maybe after later the village or the clan. But nowadays, a lot of people are create this kind of conscience, that our neighbors is every single living being. So before, in the anthropocentrism viewpoint, is the ego, us as human beings on the top of this triangle, and all the others living beings below. So it's a kind of paradigm where the selfishness and proud are very strong. But we would like to propose another paradigm, the eco paradigm, where the human being is mixed with all other living beings. There is no hierarchy. Oh, this word is always hard for me. There is no hierarchy, yes. So we are all together, but with Sharit, we established this relationship with all living beings because, okay, we are different. Why? Because we have the capacity to understand what's going on around us. Not just us as a human being, but we have more research to understand even this dynamic of the natures. No? We were able to figure out that the sand from the desert nourished the rainforest in Brazil and so on. So we have this conscience. We have tools to figure out how the nature works. So our responsibility is even bigger just because we are aware about that. How fragile is this dynamic? So the conscience, our love your neighbor as yourself, should be amplified for all living beings. That's the eco paradigm, in opposition to the anthropocentrism paradigm. So that's it. Okay, thank you so much.